No time for Arsenal to celebrate, Simon. They've got to focus on the Champions League after returning to the top of the Premier League. A huge semi-final against Atletico Madrid. I mean, what are you expecting in this game?
It's an interesting game, I think, because the conception coming into it would be we're going to see a classic Simeone dogged defensive team, and probably given the way Arsenal have been playing, this is not going to be the semi-final for the neutrals. But this is actually, looking through Atletico's results and watching a bit of them play, they're very different to a classic Simeone team. I think they're far more attacking, they're far more leaky when it comes to goals. So I think it could be a more open game than people expect. And for Arsenal, I don't know about you, but I was chatting to some of my mates who are fans the other day, and there's sort of weird thing where it's almost like snuck up on them, this semi-final, because everyone's been so focused on the title race and getting over the line there, obviously the City game, Newcastle game, that it's suddenly like, we've got a Champions League semi-final here. And maybe for the squad it might be a good thing that we've seen, I think, in the past, just getting out of that title race headspace and focusing on the Champions League could be a good thing. But it's a game that's almost snuck up on people, I think.
Yeah, it's almost the reverse of last season. I think last season there was so much focus on the Champions League because the Premier League was out of reach. By the time Arsenal were playing the Real Madrids and the PSGs, Liverpool had run away with it. There was no way they were going to catch them in the league title. So I think there was very much more of a focus on the Champions League, whereas this time, like you say, it kind of feels like it's crept up on them. And I think there's something in that in terms of like a refreshing side for the players to move away from that like really like intense nagging feeling of trying to finally get that title over the line, because we've seen it. I mean, I don't know about you, but like I'm tired of talking about it at times. Arsenal trying to win that.
And it's not John.
Honestly, it's just it's constant them trying to get over this line. So I can't imagine how the players are feeling and how Mikel Arteta is feeling, especially Arteta, who has to sit in front of the media, 2-3 times a week and say, no, we want to end it. We're trying to win it. So I can totally understand why you would want something away. But I mean, I can't imagine that an away semi-final against a Diego Simeone team is going to be a particularly nice mental break, though. That's going to be pretty intense. But like you said, they're not quite the team people are expecting them to be. This isn't a Simeone team that sort of just sits behind the ball and counter-attacks anymore.
No, and I think if you think back to the last time Arsenal had Atletico in a European semi-final, 2018, obviously Wenger's last season, and I remember that game at the Wanda on that occasion where Atletico just absolutely shut it down and were like, we're going to kill this tie, like this is it, it's done. Against a Wenger team who obviously, as Wenger would want to do, going to entertain. It's probably a bit on the reverse here. I suspect they also feel a lot different to the Atletico team we saw earlier in the season where Arsenal thumped them 4-0. I think they've kind of found a bit more of the team they want to be and who they are. I think Alvarez in particular is going to be absolutely massive for them. I think even in that game at the Emirates earlier this season, I know they lost 4-0, but I thought looked so sharp. And in the Champions League this season, he has been really good, because the league basically it has gone for Atletico. They've really struggled in that, and I think it was quite telling. Alvarez had the weekend off and just sat on the bench and watched it, and they've saved him for this. So I think it'll be certainly an intense atmosphere. I'm excited to go and experience that. Obviously, we'll both be there and see what it's like. Noticeable reading the sort of Spanish press going into it. They've been whipping it up. Simeone saying we need the fans more than ever. A couple of the players saying this is going to be the best atmosphere all season. So they know for them this is when they need to strike in terms of the tie, because I think going to the Emirates, we've seen Arsenal in Europe so good at home. I think PSG, the only ones to beat them there under Arteta. So Atletico know that this is the game if they're going to make it to the final, where they've got to make their mark. So I think they'll come all guns blazing for that game.
Yeah, and I think you're right to say that this isn't the same team that Arsenal beat 4-0. It reminds me, again, of last season's Champions League, where I think a lot of Arsenal fans came into the semi-final against PSG thinking, we would beat these in the league phase. But by the time they'd gotten to the semi-finals, they were a completely different outfit. Like you said, they'd sort of warmed into their season. They'd felt like they'd figured out how they wanted to play. And I think it will probably be a similar situation here. And like you said, there's a lot on it for for Atletico and for Simeone, who's coming to the end of a seriously long tenure there, and he wants to go out on a high, doesn't he? So yeah, definitely can see that being an electric atmosphere. But what there is though is there is an important player missing for Atletico, Barrios in the midfield. Also, Ademola Lookman didn't play at the weekend, having injured himself in the Copa del Rey final the weekend before. Sorloth, I believe, came back, scored twice on Saturday. There was a bit of chat that he might not be available, but he's come back and scored twice, so he is. But Barrios is someone that you were telling me that the Spanish media, they really think that he could be a big loss.
Yeah, I think that is a real blow, and he's had injury issues this season, so he was out for a few months, and then the weekend was his first start coming back, and sort of limped off in the second half. And the headline on Marca on one of the pieces about him being out of the game was, we'd rather lose the game than lose Barrios. So the league's done for them, and him coming back at the weekend and then limping off, I think, was massive. So it does throw into difficulty what Simeone does, because the way they've been playing is this sort of 4-4-2 system, quite attacking, and the centre midfielders have to cover a lot of ground and do a lot of work, and Barrios is someone who can do that. So I think it is a real curveball for them, and that's why the Spanish press was so gutted that he's out of the game. For Arsenal, I think it's a huge boost, particularly when Rice and Zubimendi, still not been at the levels they have earlier this season. And in particular, if Lookman, I think we saw against Barcelona in the previous round that he can be a talent. So I think Atletico will be pushing to try and get him involved. I think he sort of suits the way Simeone wants to play and try and pin Arsenal back. But I'm excited to see how Simeone goes about it. I think it's so different to kind of have an Atletico team that are front foot and attacking and aggressive to what we know about them. But even when they do that, they're not going to forget what they were. So I think you can expect plenty of dark arts. I think you can expect plenty of physicality, hard work. The principles that define Simeone won't be lost, even if they are more attacking. And I think for Arsenal, it's going to be a real test going into an atmosphere like that and seeing if they can stand up.
Barrios obviously out, and then Lookman a doubt as well. But there's doubts. We spoke about it on the post Newcastle pod. But there's doubts for Arsenal, isn't there? Kai Havertz and Barriese, we don't know whether they're going to be available or not. I mean, I wonder how Mikel might set up if those two are out, because he's been trying to play Eze on that left-hand side, hasn't he, to have a bit more technical security, because that front three of Madueke, Gyökeres and Martinelli just doesn't seem to have the technical security and the ability to hold up the ball. If Eze's out, you'd imagine it's going to be Martinelli or Trossard coming in on that left-hand side. Maybe Bukayo Saka could be back to come in on that right-hand side. I mean, we've said that Martinelli in that front three has struggled, but I suppose in the Champions League he's probably been Arsenal's best player. Yeah,
I mean, he has been great in Champions League, hasn't he? And I think he's probably the biggest benefit of the sense that Arsenal have had more space in these games, and teams haven't been so reluctant or haven't been so happy to park the bus and sit deep. They've wanted to come and attack, and he's benefited from that. So if Eze was out, I'd be tempted to play Martinelli, given his record in the Champions League and probably the space he will get. And I think if you're going to do that, I would want to have Saka on the other side, because I think the point you make about being technically secure and having players that are good on the ball and can hold the ball, I think would make sense. I think Saka would bring that balance, whereas Madueke and Martinelli, sometimes it feels like it's a bit skewed. So if you had Saka there, I think it would help. And then up front, if there's no, Havertz, I mean, I saw some people saying, why don't you play Jesus and run it back to sort of 22, 23. I can't see Arteta doing that, given what we saw from Jesus at Southampton all those weeks ago. I think Gyökeres might be okay for this sort of game, and I think some of his best performances have been in the Champions League, in matches where there have been more space, chances to run in behind. He was good against Atletico the first time they played. So I think probably for Arteta, it wouldn't be the end of the world if you had to go with Gyökeres there, providing I think you can get Saka and Odegaard around him on that right channel. I think that'll be key. I think we've seen Martinelli, Gyökeres and Madueke doesn't work, and I think to make it work with Gyökeres up top, I think you need sort of Saka and Odegaard around him.
And then I guess the question about the team news is that Arsenal now have to balance this with then playing another final in terms of that Fulham game. Game 2 of the 5-game series that Mikel Arteta keeps talking about. So you have to wonder whether he's going to have to try and make substitutions later in the game. And it does make me wonder whether maybe he is going to go to Atletico and think, no, we are just going to just try and hold something on here for the second leg, and we'll use the home advantage next week, sort of thing. Because I think he values having sort of a bed to work off for the second game, and I think he knows that when his team play defensively, they probably can translate that into their next game a little bit better than they could if they were sort of going hell for leather. But like you say, I don't think that this Atletico team are going to sit back the way they normally would. So I think there might have to be a bit of back and forth. And it could be a far more exciting game than I think people would be expecting it to be. I guess the last question I would have is do you think that this Arsenal team can balance that? You know, there's 3 games here that they have to win all 3, really. Do you think they're going to be able to?
Yeah, my fear is from a physical point of view rather than a mental. I think mentally, I think it'll actually do them well being out of the title race. My worry is kind of, has Arteta got the sort of trust to rotate enough? And I look at someone like Rice and Zubimendi and think like, you know, this is 3 games coming up. This is going to absolutely take it out of them. That's my biggest concern. I think I agree with you in terms of how they'll set up. I think we've seen in both of the previous rounds, you know, where it's Sporting, where it by Leverkusen, Arsenal didn't really go for it in those first legs. They were kind of happy for, you know, even in the Sporting game, I think they would have been happy going back with a 0-0, and in Leverkusen they were happy with the 1-1 because I think they trust themselves at the Emirates. But I think this game might present more opportunities. My worry in terms of, I think, you know, we've spoken about how you could rotate and attack when you might have to be because of Gyökeres coming in and possibly Saka. My concern in terms of the legs for these 3 games lies in that midfield, and looking at Zubimendi and Rice and thinking, I can't really see a world where they don't have to start 3 times in a row, and how is it going to take them out of them, and how are they going to cope with that? So it's going to take some serious management from Arteta. I think, as you say, if you can get players off early at any point in these games, that will help. Everywhere else in the squad, I think I can see you doing that. I can see you trying to know Mosquera and White sharing the minutes, Calafiori and Capier. It's just those 2 centre mids that I really worry about come that second leg at the Emirates. What sort of state are they going to be in?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like Mikel Arteta trusts Christian Norgard. He was asked about it in his press conference, actually. One of the reporters said after the Newcastle game, asked him point blank, why aren't you playing Christian Norgard? And he just didn't answer it. He was basically just like,
yeah.
He was basically like, I really like him.
I mean, anything he could say on Norgard will not speak louder than his actions, to be honest with you. And the fact he's played, I think it's under an hour of Premier League minutes, says it all. And this is where the absence of Mourinho has been so felt, hasn't it? Because I think he would have swallowed up a lot of those minutes and taken a lot of the pressure off, even in attack as well. You know, I think for a game like this, if Mourinho was fit, you'd be really tempted away from home to have him up top leading the line. I think his hope he might be back before the end of the season, but just the burden it's taken on Rice and Zubimendi, I think these 3 games now is going to be a real test. And if they come through it, fair play, but that is where my concern is, really. I'm
cautious of time, but I do just want to ask you now, you brought up Mikel Merino. If Mikel Merino was fit, do you think Mikel Arteta would start him over Victor Gyökeres up front for this game?
Oof. I mean, I would. Do I think Arteta would? I think he'd be very tempted. I think he might. I think there is a world I can see why you would fancy Gyökeres for this game if Atletico play with the intent we think they will. I think there could be that space in behind, and it could suit Gyökeres and Martinelli, those type of players. But I mean, Moreno, I think these past sort of 4 or 5 weeks where Arsenal struggled and had difficult games, I just think he'd have had such a big role, and it's probably been an understated miss. And if they can get him back, even just for the kind of final 2 league games and possibly, who knows, a Champions League final, I mean, that would be an absolutely massive boost, I think, for this squad.
Certainly would be, but he isn't fit, so we don't have to worry about it. I was just interested. It probably will be Victor Gyökeres, so yeah, we'll see how they get on, but another massive game. But thank you very much, Simon, and thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.